Welcome to Off the Shelf with Christine and Katie. As the year comes to a close, it's time to wrap it up with our final picks. All year we have shared with you our book recommendations, and now we wanted to share some of our co-workers' favorite reads of the year. And we've asked them to share why it was their favorite pick as well. It's time for Staff Picks 2023.
Okay, so as always, so settle in, grab a cup of your favorite beverage, and enjoy these recommendations. Feel free to read them now or add them to your TBR for the future. We're looking to make your list longer. Help us out here.
Much longer.
Of course. And as always, let us know in the comments whether you liked these picks or not, or if you have any titles to add. Trust me, we just want to make our list longer at this point. And we need to fill up this list for the end of the year.
Yeah.
And as always, if you wish to be notified of new videos, be sure to like and subscribe below. But, as always, let's get to those books.
Katie, why don't you start us off with some picks from our circulation department?
Sure. So the first one comes from our colleague Sabrina. She recommends The Sacred Band by James Romm. It is a nonfiction book. Interesting, we started with nonfiction this time. So this nonfiction book tells the very interesting story of the Sacred Band, an elite 300-man corps recruited from pairs of lovers. It highlights a chaotic area of ancient Greek history. 4 decades marked by battles, ideological disputes, and a rise of victorious strongmen. That sounds really interesting.
It does.
Yes. And for those who don't know this character, she also recommends Nightwing Volume 1 and Leaping into the Light, which is a graphic novel / comic. And it is, as a young man, Dick Grayson retires as Robin and takes on his own superhero identity, Nightwing. Now he is back in Bloodhaven, and his drive to keep his adopted city safe has never been stronger. Nightwing has always been one of my favorites.
Next up, we have a pick from Susan. And she says, I really enjoyed The Nothing Man by Catherine Ryan Howard. It's about the sole survivor of a family killing and the man who killed the family. Chapters alternate between the survivor and the killer. Now, the library does not own a physical copy of this book, but she borrowed it on Hoopla, which is one of our ebook resources. If you're interested in knowing more about Hoopla or Libby, we'll put a link below that you can get some more information.
So our next recommendation comes from our colleague Joanne, and she says, I'm a dedicated psychological suspense reader, specifically domestic suspense. Ooh, she went there. The Eden Test by Adam Sternberg was a perfect read for me. It is about a young couple who goes away for a secluded anniversary weekend to test their love and commitment, and nothing is as it seems. Da 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 da.
Next up, we have a few picks from Annie. So the first one she starts us off with is I'm Never Fine, Scenes and Spams of Loss by Joseph Leza. First-time author Joseph Leza has proven his talent, writing a true story mostly focused on the diagnosis and later death of his father. The book is written as a series of essays. I found it heart-wrenching. That said, Joseph found a way to inject some humor. I'm Never Fine is a book written from the heart, and it shows. Though it may be hard to read sometimes, it is well worth it.
That title sounds like the title of my autobiography.
She also recommended Just the Nicest Couple by Mary Kubica.
Always Mary Kubica.
And what she said about this was that this book has everything needed in a thriller. The death of a husband, the wife's search for answers, a twist followed by the wow at the end. Mary does not disappoint.
No, Annie always recommends her books.
Yes. And then she also recommended It's One of Us by J.T. Ellison.
Another Annie favorite.
And this is another great thriller. She said police show up at Olivia and Park's home looking for their son who is a suspect in a murder. The fact is that the couple do not have any children. First secret revealed, Park had donated sperm to a clinic before the marriage.
Oh boy.
So more secrets continue to emerge on the journey to finding the murderer. She said this is a must read.
And the next one Annie recommends is by Lisa Jewell, and it's called None of This Is True. And this suspense thriller will keep you on your toes. Don't take anything for granted. And yes, at the end you'll be wondering if it is true. Won't give anything away. Plan on staying up when you read this book.
Sounds
good. It always sounds interesting. And the next one she recommends is The Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. And our colleague Marissa also recommends this one. She says, I do not want to end. Really needed this after the week I've had book. An artist, face blindness, and a dog. Interesting. All the right ingredients for another Catherine Center that does not disappoint. You need to read this. All right, and now we have some selections from the children's department. Our first one is from our colleague Jamie, and she recommends Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. And it's described as psychological fiction. This was a scary page-turner. A man named Jack seems to have it all, except a wife. He meets and marries Grace. They seem like the perfect couple, but no one knows what happens behind closed doors. Dun, dun, dun.
All right, next we'd like to introduce Jennifer from the children's department. She had some recommendations for you as well.
Yeah, take it away, Jen.
My recommendations are intended for adults who enjoyed reading the classic The Secret Garden as children. There's a book that's actually written for adults by Martin McDowell called Unearthing the Secret Garden, The Places and Plants That Inspired Frances Hodgins Burnett. McDowell is actually a horticultural professional. She writes, she reads, she lectures, she teaches, she consults about gardening for a variety of places, including the New York Botanical Gardens. And she credits The Secret Garden as being the catalyst for her interest in gardening and becoming a gardening professional. It's not exactly a traditional biography. Instead, it focuses specifically on Frances Hodgins Burnett's experience with gardening and gardens. As you might have guessed from the book, she was a passionate and hardworking gardener, and in McDowell's book, we're given lavish descriptions of Burnett's gardens in the UK, the US, and Bermuda. She had dual citizenship, and through her gardens, we learn about Burnett herself. The book also contains a gardening essay written by Burnett. And I have another book for lovers of The Secret Garden as children called A Bit of Earth by Karuna Riazi. And this is a book to share with the children in your life. I personally have tried sharing The Secret Garden with kids, but the pacing just does not appeal to 21st century gardens. And A Bit of Earth is actually a modern rewriting of the original classic, the author of the book is a teacher as well as someone who grew up loving The Secret Garden as a child. So her book actually preserves all the best parts of the original novel, but is more appealing and accessible to children growing up today. It's a wonderful way for an adult to share the love of the classic with the children in their life in a way that the kids will actually enjoy.
From the Public Relations Department, we have Walter. And he recommends Silent Came the Monster by Amy Hill Hearth. He says, I think by now most people are aware that Peter Benchley's novel Jaws was inspired by the shark attack in Matawan Creek on July 12, 1916. This novel's central focus is that attack, but the narrative begins with a sighting on June 17, 1880, then jumps ahead to July 1916 to follow the several shark sightings and attacks along the Jersey Shore in Ocean and Monmouth counties, including a sighting in Bayonne, his hometown. He says his grandparents were living in Bayonne at the time, and he's sure that they knew all about this. He had never heard about the multiple attacks during that time, but a search confirmed them. Hearth weaves a fascinating tale, including many real events and people who were involved, and how the media and the public reacted to the news during a health epidemic as well as an unusually hot July.
Such interesting New Jersey news that I never was aware of.
It's wonderful.
Nice. And from the reference department, our first recommendation comes from our colleague Marissa, and she recommends Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. And it's about Elliot and Macy, started out as best friends, sharing their love of books, the California countryside, their trials and successes. But one devastating night drove them apart. Oof. Meeting again as adults with an ocean of baggage between them, can they find their way back to each other? A second chance of love told in alternating timelines. I'm sure they can. They can make it happen.
It's gonna happen.
Oh, sure. And I know Marissa really loved this next recommendation. She's mentioned it numerous times. And this is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. She said this was a magical book where the main character steps into her aunt's apartment and is sent 7 years into the past. Well, that's my nightmare. She meets the man currently staying in the apartment and begins a love story that I was on edge of my seat for. Ashley Poston's writing style is amazing, and she even leaves some Easter eggs from previous book, which she really enjoyed. Oh, that's really nice. I like when people tie in their books.
Yeah.
And the next one she recommends is called The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy. And The Graham Effect by Elle Kennedy is a second-generation hockey romance where the main character is the daughter of the characters from her previous book called The Deal. I loved going back to this universe and seeing characters from past books. It was also the first time I have read about a female hockey player, which is really exciting. That's actually a really good point. I've never seen one about female hockey players.
Interesting. Yes. Mostly the sports are about the male
For the most part, yeah.
Next up, Marissa recommends Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I also recommend this book.
You might know this book, heard about it by now because of the Apple TV show.
Yes. So this novel follows single mother Elizabeth Zott, a brilliant chemist in a man's world, 1960s America, as she becomes an unlikely and well-loved cooking show host and the role model her daughter deserves. As Katie mentioned, this book has been adapted into an Apple TV series. There's also an author talk available on our website, which we will link to below.
Yes, it was actually really interesting. I highly recommend you check that out.
Then we have The Fourth Wing, also recommended by Marissa. This is by Rebecca Yarros, and this is also recommended by our director, Kate. All right, and it's enter the brutal and elite world of a war college for dragon riders in this adult fantasy novel. It's the first book in the new Empyrean epic fantasy series, and if you've been anywhere on social media, you'll know this book is hot.
This book has been everywhere.
The second book in the series was just released in November as well, so if you haven't started, you've got two wonderful books to begin with.
Yep. And the next one I want to recommend is from our new reference manager, also named Katie. And the first one she recommends is Broken Monsters by Lauren Bukes. And is about Detective Gabriela Versado has seen a lot of bodies, but this one is even more unique by Detroit standards. Half boy, half deer, somehow fused together. Interesting. Stranger and even more disturbing bodies are soon discovered in this serial killer horror novel. Culturally diverse, a different type of horror. Katie really enjoyed it, and she hopes everyone does as well.
Then next, recommended by Liz, we have How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson. Now, this book is Tommy is a boy destined to never be remembered. On the same day every year, everyone around him forgets he exists, and he grows up enduring his own universal reset.
Interesting.
It is until something extraordinary happens. He falls in love. Determined to finally have a life and land the girl of his dreams, Tommy sets out on a mission to finally trick the reset and be remembered. Liz said this book touched her heart. It was so inspirational. It was full of resilience. You root for the main character throughout. It was very emotional, but in a good way. She said she would definitely buy this book and give it as a gift.
I'm definitely adding that to my list later. Okay, and the next one we're going to recommend is from our most voracious reader in the library, Ebony. And the first one she recommends is The Trees Grew Because I Bled There by Eric LaRocca. It is horror and short stories, and this is about 8 short stories of a literary dark fiction from a master storyteller. Exploring the darker side of love, these are tales of grief, obsession, and control. And the next one she recommends is one I've had on my list and I hope to be reading soon, is The September House by Carissa Orlando. It is a horror novel. And it is about a thrilling psychological horror debut about a woman who is determined to stay in her dream home, even after it becomes haunted, no matter the cost. I would also stay in a haunted house. Do you know the cost of houses these days? Forget it. You can survive anything, is what Margaret tells herself as her dream home becomes filled with terrifying apparitions and walls that drip blood. Well, even more work. I just bit my tongue on that one.
Next up, Ebony also recommends Babel by R.F. Kuang. And this is a fantasy historical fiction. I would recommend this one. I've started reading it and I find it very enjoyable. It's set in an alternative reality 1830s England in which Britain's global economic and colonial supremacy are fueled by the use of magical silver bars. Their power comes from capturing what is lost in translation between words in different languages that have similar but not identical meanings.
I've heard of this book everywhere.
Yeah. Also, Ebony recommends The Big Bang Theory by Jessica Radloff. And again, this is one I would recommend too. It's a nonfiction entertainment. The show started off with 4 friends, nerds who were obsessed with science, Star Wars comics, and the hot girl next door.
As you do.
Yes. But in the end, the show became so much more, tackling topics like intimacy, consent, motherhood, marriage, career, money, all with humor and heart. It's a great behind-the-scenes look at this series and the characters.
And the next one Ebony recommends is a manga and Japanese translated series called The Running Kenshin by Nobuhiro Watsuki. And this is also recommended by our coworker Allison to Ebony. This manga series tells the story of a wanderer named Kenshin, who used to be called by a different name during the Japanese Civil War. His tale is about redemption of his past and all of his murders by helping those in trouble with his reverse blade sword, the Sakabato.
Now, as we mentioned, Ebony is one of our most voracious readers at this library, and she's always full of many recommendations.
Always.
We don't have time to get into all that she recommended from this year, so we're going to just pop up a
Here's
list
a list
here
that she recommends.
of other recommendations, many of which are translations, if that's something you like. Of course, we wanted to give you some of our favorites from this year as well. So we have some that we both enjoyed and would give you a pick that we wanted to let you know about first.
So, our first one is one we mentioned before, but a beloved one. It was a reread for me this year, but it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And it is an interesting Faustian retelling, reminiscent of Owen Henry's Gift of the Magi. Highly recommend, love the story of Addie LaRue. And the next one that me and Christine both really loved is called Marple, 12 New Mysteries. And it is 12 contemporary mystery/suspense writers give us new stories about our beloved Jane Marple. Love her, wish I lived next door to her.
Then also we have The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is the second book in the series where we continue to follow the antics of Elizabeth, Joyce, Abram, and Ron. Better than the first book, and Katie says she looks forward to reading the third one.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite mystery series, so I'm right up with it.
And that says a lot for me because I did not love the first one. I have loved the second.
Then we have The Widows of Malabar Hill by Shuddata Massey.
You might have heard us mention this before.
This is a great historical mystery based loosely on the first female solicitor in India. I had recommended this book to Katie a couple of years ago, and I'm so happy it became one of your favorites as well.
I'm so happy. And we're reading another one of hers soon, so I look forward to that.
Yes.
All right. And you might have heard of this series before, but I'm currently doing my reread, and so is Christine. It is the Harry Potter series, but specifically for me, at least, it's the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and the Chamber of Seers by J.K. Rowling. And obviously, as we mentioned before, we started a reread of the series together this summer. Highly recommend trying to reread. There are so many details that you pick up on the second time around. I'm currently on book 3, and Christine is already ahead of me on book 6, as usual.
Then another one that we both loved was The Maid by Nita Prose. And it's just a very enjoyable light mystery, and we're both looking forward to reading the sequel as well this year.
Yes, can't wait. And just here are some of my additional picks that I have loved this year. One is called The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. Have I Told You This Already by Lauren Graham for those Gilmore Girls fans. The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Hester by Lori Legal Albanese. Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. Kako by Rachel Harrison. For those fans of some really light, cozy horror, I highly recommend this. She came to speak here at our library, which is also available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to check it out. But the only way I can describe it, for spoiler-free warnings, it's like Gilmore Girls, but if it had witches, which is truly the dream that I've always wanted.
And a few additional picks that I enjoyed this year was Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Really no explanation necessary. No. It was just a wonderful memoir. I really enjoyed it. All Hallows by Christopher Golden. Hold on a second.
It's okay.
All Hallows by Christopher Golden. It was a great 80s Halloween horror movie. Book. It was great. Then there was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister.
I also love this one.
Okay. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldtree. A wonderful cozy fantasy. It was the first cozy fantasy I ever read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Then one of my sons and I, we did a read together of both Fairy Tale and The Institute by Stephen King. I'm so happy to start reading Stephen King again because the last time I read him as a teenager, I got scared and
never again.
And just another quick note on the rereads. I'm also currently rereading the Percy Jackson series with my other son, and it's another great one to look at again. I haven't read it for about 10 years. I just finished up The Place, The Sun and the Star, which is a side story with Nico D'Angelo, and it was absolutely wonderful.
Nice.
I would recommend it. Read it with your kids. Read it by yourself. They were great.
Awesome.
Yes, but there's a look into what we were reading at the library this
Yeah.
year, and we hope you found a pick or two. And as always, you want to let us know what you're reading.
Yes,
Comment.
let us know what you read this year that you enjoyed a lot. If we look forward to seeing what you guys read as well.
Exactly.
And
So,
until next year,
happy
happy
reading.
reading. Take care.
Take care.